Lesson 9 is a short one. It covers gradients and blends. And both are ways of blending color as well as shapes from one configuration to another. This is the start of the exercise, and they give you the illustration. And you'll notice at the end, the only thing that they've done is pretty much they've blended the type, so they're created a gradient in the type. They've blended colors between shapes and that sort of thing. Another thing to look at too is notice that the little beads around her necklace. Okay, there are ways that you can blend shapes together and attach them to a path. And if we look at the start, you'll notice that it's missing here. You just see the 3 beads, and there is a way to connect them to a path. Okay. So I'm going to create a brand new file. And I'll start by reviewing gradients. So you'll need the gradient panel up. Let me close some of these other LEDs. And we need a color panel. And it would be nice if we had swatches here, which we do. So I'll move that up. And they have some preset gradients for us. So, since I have talked about gradients, this is sort of a review. But I'll start by creating a shape and then selecting for a fill, making sure that the fill button is in the foreground, selecting one of the gradients for that fill. And as soon as you select it, depending on the type of gradient it is, and there are only 2 types, this one happens to be a radial gradient. It distributes the colors equally throughout the shape. So as you can see, that it goes from yellow to orange, yellow being in the center and orange being in the outer edge. From here, with the shape selected, we can also switch, and we can specify this to be a linear gradient. And again, it goes from yellow to orange. If you wish to swap the colors, if you want it to go from orange to yellow, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either move the tabs at the bottom, and that will allow you to switch it, or you can use the gradient tool, and you can click and drag, and you can pull it in any direction. Wherever you click will be where the gradient begins, and wherever you drag and then release will be where the gradient ends. So if I just click here and drag to here and release, the gradient starts here and ends here abruptly, and whatever colors lie at either end of the spectrum of the gradient will remain. So it's a soft one. So you have a choice. And again, if I decide that I want the center of the radial gradient to be over here, I click, I drag, and notice I have a little hot spot over there. That makes sense to everyone? If you wish to create your own gradients, or add or modify the existing gradients, it's pretty straightforward. You need the gradient panel visible. And then what you can do to add a color, add as many colors as you want. I believe it will accept up to maybe 64 colors, and that really gets a little unwieldy if you want to use that many colors. It would be a better way to work. Is at the bottom where the color tabs are, just simply click. And what it will do is it will add a tab, and it will automatically, wherever you click, it will blend the colors at either end of the spectrum. Now with this tab selected, we can use the color bar here, and we can select another color. And then, depending on how you want to distribute the colors, it can be evenly distributed between the 3, or one can dominate. So let me go ahead and make this evenly distributed again. And here you go. Notice how the blue dominates. If I pull it back, notice how it's a little bit it changes the distribution. Likewise, between colors, you can control how colors are distributed. So by default, it distributes them equally, but depending on what you want to do, how tight or how loose or how smooth you want the distribution of colors, you can control from here. And then if you decide this gradient is important, it's a part of the project that I'm working on, and I will use it in the future, to simply take and either from the color panel or from here, the gradient panel, click and drag and pull it into your swatch panel and release. Or another way of doing it, I'm going to go ahead and delete it, is with whatever gradient, whatever fill you have selected, click the new swatch button and it will automatically add whatever current fill is selected. And it adds that gradient we just created. So to add a gradient to a shape, my recommendation is that you make sure that it's a closed path. Everybody, any questions about that? Everybody knows how to create a closed path. Okay, not an open one. To add gradients to type is pretty straightforward. You first need to create some type, so we'll do that. Oops. Go ahead and make sure that this is nice and bold and big. So 144. And instead of Miriam Pro, Impact is a good one. It's nice and bold. Because what I want to do is just not fill the type with a solid color, which I can do, or stroke the type, but instead what I want to do is put a gradient. Okay. In order to do that, you need to convert the editable type into objects, into shapes. Because if I were to select a gradient now, it just doesn't do anything. I mean, even if I were to make a mistake here, even if I select highlight all the type and I select the gradient, it won't do it. So instead, what to do is that you make a copy of the type. And again, you don't have to, this is my recommendation, because I like to think in terms of contingency plans. If I discover later on I want to change the typeface, I misspell the word, whatever, then I can take this one and delete it and then come back to the one that I use as a backup and make a copy of it again and follow the same steps. Now, in order to fill this with a gradient, what you do is you select the type with the selection tool, and you go to the type menu and select Create Outlines. You'll notice that the baseline went away, that all of the shapes now are defined by the anchor point, by the anchor points that define Bezier paths and curves. Okay. So if I were to go back into the type tool and try to click on here to edit it and type, all it's going to do is it's create a new type. It can't. This is no longer editable. But what I can do when I select this, and it does convert it to a group, is that I can create either a fill or a gradient, meaning a pattern fill or a gradient, and it applies that gradient to each of the shapes. And by default, it will take the gradient and it will take each of the letter forms as a separate shape and apply the gradient in total to each one. But if I wish to distribute the gradient evenly throughout all of the shapes, then as a second step, you need to take the gradient tool. And for example, if I would rather have the gradient be distributed vertically from top to bottom, then I click and I drag like so. If I want to constrain the direction, hold down the shift key and let go. And now notice that it's distributed among all of the shapes. That single gradient among all of the shapes. So that's how you do that. Likewise, if I would rather have it stretch across horizontal, then it does that. And this can be very effective. It can be a really nice way of taking your type and making it more illustrative. You can still take each of the shapes, you can outline them, you can change the thickness of the path, the color of the path, and so on and so forth. So that's gradients. I think I have covered them pretty thoroughly. The next thing that I'm going to cover are blends. And the blend tool is the tool just beneath the eyedropper tool. It's sort of like a gradient, but it's not. And in some cases, it can be used in lieu of a gradient. I like to think of the blend tool as sort of a morph tool. What it will do is it will morph colors as well as shapes. And it can do it in a smooth transition, or it can do it in individual or incremental steps. What do I mean by that? What if I wanted to start with a square, so, and I'm going to fill it with a solid color instead. And then I have the other end over here, I have a circle. So I'm going to make it yellow. Actually, let's do this one. I'm going to make this one violet so you can see the difference. What if I wanted to create a series of shapes between the square and the circle? I mean, if you were to blend these two, what would those, and morph them, what would those intermediate shapes look like? In addition, when I morphed the shapes, I wanted if I were actually mixing color, on a palette with acrylics or oils or whatever, what would the colors look like when I blend in even steps between this blue, violet, and the yellow? Okay. Well, I can do that using the blend tool. And to do the blend tool, I select it, and I click on a point here. And this can be the tricky part, and I will try to make this screw up. When I want things to get screwed up, they don't, and when I do, then they don't. I can't make them fail. But I think I'll make it work this time. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to click on one of the top points, and then I come up here to a top point, and I click. And notice it's a smooth, even blend from a square to a circle. But what if I want to see the individual steps? Then what I do is I double click on the blend tool, and it shows me the blend options. And by default, it shows smooth color. But if I want to look at specified steps, and it shows me that it divided this into 254 steps. But what if I only want to see 4 steps? Now you can see not only the shapes clearly morphing from a square to a circle, or a circle to a square, but you can also see the precise mixture of color between those. Pretty cool, huh? You can create some interesting transitions from one shape to another. Meaning, for example, what if you had a butterfly, that was derived or morphed from a caterpillar? You can create, if you work with it carefully, you can create some interesting transitions from one shape to another. And not only the shape, but if you need to or you want to, the color as well. What's nice about this is that you'll notice that there is a path that connects these. If you're done with this, if I click OK, see this path right here? It connects these shapes. By default, it connects them in a straight line. But what I can do is I can deselect, and I can use the direct selection tool, maybe to be able to see things a little bit easier. I'm going to go to View and show Smart Guides here. And if I move over the path, I can move like so, and I can move these in different directions. In addition to that, I can come in here and I can take the Convert point tool, and I can pull out tangent handles, and notice it follows the path. So they're basically, if you think of clothes on a clothesline, then wherever you move the clothesline, the clothes will be attached and follow it. That is in fact where they get the transition from this one bead to this one to this one. It's pretty straightforward. If I zoom in, for example, and I select the blend tool, and I click on one, and I click on another, it by default creates a smooth blend, and then click on this one. So it doesn't have to be just between two shapes. It can be multiple shapes. Now, with the shape selected, I double click on the blend tool, and now specify, okay, I don't want a smooth blend, I want specified steps. So instead of 188, maybe I want 5, and that will mean 5 even steps between each shape. See what we're getting? It links it with a path, and I can come back with the convert direction tool, and I can come down here on the path itself and click and drag and pull it out a little bit. Now notice that when you pull on the tangent handles, they tend to gather or cluster about that. So if I wanted it distributed a little bit more evenly, I would have to pull on here a little bit, and then it nudges them back a little bit. And then tinker with the tangent handles a little bit so that the shapes are distributed a little bit more equally.
What tool is that? The tool, which one is it?
It's this one right here. Oh, you mean to which? To get the path? To change the path or to connect them?
That little tool you have on right now.
Right now I have the convert direction tool. It's the one that's right underneath the pen tool. It looks like a caret symbol.
All right.
Right there. The other thing they've done that's similar is that if you have a group of shapes, like so, oh, come on. See, these are a group, and I want to blend it with a group down here. If I use the blend tool, it's a nice way of making even steps, even gradients between them. So I can select the blend tool again, and I can click like point with like point, and it blends in even steps. I double click. That was 5 steps. Now if I want maybe 3 steps. Look at that. That's another way of creating a whole grid without creating individual shapes. You just create 2 lines, the beginning and the end, and it automatically distributes them between, which can be pretty effective. Likewise, it blends the colors inside those shapes. Other things the blend tool can be used for. Is that back in the day, before there was the gradient mesh tool, which I will talk about tomorrow, there were only a few ways that you could blend colors. If you use the gradient, then you're restricted to a linear gradient or a radial gradient, and that's it, and that's throughout the entire shape, and that gives you the limits. But if you have compound curves, then what do? How do you blend colors between compound curves? And I'll show you what I mean by that. There is something else I forgot. Let me come back here. Remember I said that right now these are connected, but what if you wanted to unconnect, disconnect them? Create them as independent shapes. Select them, and then go to Object. And then where it says Compound X. I'm going to mess up. Path. There we go. It's under plane. That would be a little too obvious. We can go ahead and release or expand. And now by expanding, notice that it's a group, but they're all independent shapes that are not strung together by a path. So now I can ungroup them. Object, ungroup. Or I can use the group tool, and I can manipulate these independently. So if you're in a quandary about how to create an intermediate shape sometimes, you know, what if I wanted a shape is it between this and between that? Try using the blend tool. Again, before I jump ahead here, and I didn't mean to, I'm going to go back again and to show you what will happen if you pick the wrong points. You try to pick a like point with a like point, meaning that if it's a top, then you pick another top point. But when you have two top points, which one do you pick? It's a guessing game, to be quite honest. But if I select the top point here with the bottom point here, now notice what happens. Notice how it twists them. It brings them together and it twists and reconfigures them. So that's where problems can arise, unless that's the desired effect that you want. You want to create kind of a twisted, contorted look. Okay, now I can move on. This time I'm only going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to make a series of just 3 paths. And I don't want to fill, I only want to stroke. And I'm going to come back in here with my direct selection tool. And I'm going to tweak this a little bit so it's kind of a nice little sine wave here. And before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the stroke tool to increase the thickness of the stroke. So maybe a 6-point rule. It will vary depending on what you're doing, the thickness that you'll need. So window and select stroke. And here it is. Let's bump this up to maybe 6 points so you can see it. And I'm going to make copies of it. Just 2 copies. You can make as many copies as you like. And I will take each of these and make them a different color. They could be the same color, they can be white, go from white to black to whatever colors you want. And now I'm going to select the blend tool. And select again on like points. Nice smooth blend. And then click here. Nice smooth blend. So when would something like this be useful? Well, there are a number of ways that you could do this, but for example, what if you were creating an image of a bowl, an inside concave shape of a bowl, and you wanted to create in a stylized graphic way that it is concave? How would you do that? What we could do is let's start with the ellipse tool. I'm going to make a nice, this would be the interior of the bowl. And maybe at the bottom here we could have another one. And it doesn't have to be centered, and it doesn't have to be an ellipse either. It could be any kind of shape that I want. I can go ahead, let's pick a different color here, just to show you what's going on. Let's select shape. Select another color so you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to create a mistake. Go ahead in here. Just a little. This is kind of a little irregular shape down here that you want to blend between this and this. Make sure that this is filled with yellow so you can see. Okay. So to blend these two, you use the blend tool. So, and again, I try to pick light point with light point. The easier if I had. Let's go back to view, smart control. It blends the two. And you can, take individual shapes and move them. So if take the root selection tool, and it reconfigures the blend. And it's different from using a radial blend, because it is in fact blending one shape. Not an extremely good example, but you kind of get the idea what I'm talking about. They don't have to be the same shapes to blend from one to another. I don't think I'm missing anything, but if you have questions about gradients, there may be, if I recall, come down here. It's open swatch library, and there might be some gradients in here, if I remember. Patterns neutral, maybe not. I thought there were. Oh, there are, right here, there we go. Gradients, brights, color combinations, color harmonies, earth tones, foliage, fruits and vegetables, gems and jewels, metals, whole slew of them. So if you wanted, different gradients, different kinds of skin tones, there you go. So if you were creating a portrait and you wanted different kinds of color blends and gradients, you would have them here. And every time you use one of them, it will be added to your palette here. These are separate palettes, okay? And you cannot edit these until you use it. You maybe add it to your palette that applies to this particular file. So that's gradients and blends. And then tomorrow I will talk about the gradient mesh tool, which is a different animal altogether. And it's a much more complex way of blending colors within a shape. Okay? And there are some gotchas that I want to talk about. There are things that you need to be concerned about when you do use that tool. Because it is a useful tool, it's a powerful tool, but you can paint yourself into a corner, as it were, if you're not careful. Okay. Any questions? Anything that you want me to talk about that I haven't covered or that I have covered and you want me to review? No? Okay, well, I hope to have this up on the website tonight. All the others should be working. Okay. Should be working on your mask assignment. Okay. Okay.
I sent you an email.
Yes,